right, welcome everyone. Thank you for making the time to connect here to this webinar today. We're going to talk about how to build a drinks brand that people love. And depending on the report that you have read recently, or depending on the news, we can all agree that the economy is not in an ideal state right now. So that's why today joining me is Matt Remphrey from Parallax Design. He's the owner of Parallax Design. And they are a brand strategy, identity, and packaging design consultancy in Australia. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christian. It's fantastic to be here, and thanks for everyone for joining and spending some time with me this morning. I'm going to talk about how to. This is something that we've been thinking about in the studio here. Is not only just to get customers and get a loyal following for your drinks brand, but actually to get people to really love it and turn a customer into a fan. So it's something that I'll sort of run through, and some of the principles that we work to, and hopefully it can be transferable to your businesses as well. The topics that I'm going to go through today, first one is how to build what we call an unsubstitutable brand. So you can walk into a liquor store and, say you're looking for a bottle of Shiraz, you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of choices. So how is it that you can build a brand, a drinks brand that stands for something and is unsubstitutable, that, the liquor store has to have it in there, the customer has to have it in their hands, the restaurant has to have it on their menu list. That's something that let's take very seriously. Then we'll go into fish where the fish are, which is really just talking through strategy and portfolio strategy and channel strategy, and looking at who your customer is at various channels and various points along that sort of customer journey. We're going to go into naming and how important naming is, and again, how does channel really sort of drive naming and can influence it as well. And then once we go through that, how do we bring all that strategy? How do we bring it all to life? And what are the important things to consider as we bring a brand into the world? So just a little bit of context about Parallax. We're located in South Australia, and so we've got a very strong vertical on drinks. What you will hear here will probably be a little bit wine-centric, but I'm sure you'll be able to take it over into other drink categories as well. South Australia is responsible for about 60% of Australia's wine production, so it's a pretty big industry here. Like around the world, it's having its not really having its day in the sun at the moment. There are a lot of problems with the oversupply and finding new markets for wine. But then what's really starting to take off here, obviously, is craft spirits and craft beer, which we do a lot of work in as well. We're a sort of very close family of strategists, designers, writers, thinkers, doers, and collaborators. And we've been running for just over 20 years. But what it really sort of excites us, and we do a lot of work for large corporates, but I think our sweet spot is for independent family-owned drinks businesses. And it's the sort of the people behind the brands and what their aspirations are, and what their view of success and their struggles are. And that's what sort of really sort of fires up us and gets us up in the morning. So it's a little bit about us, just to put it into context. And so let's jump straight in. So the first one, how to become unsubstitutable. We're going to sort of start talking about brand strategy, but I just want to break it right down. And the first thing that we talk about is brand is reputation. So it's everything you want the market or the customer to think about you, and what they think about you, what they say about you when you're not in the room, is what brand is all about. So every single entity has a reputation out there. The market will form a reputation, but brand actually gives you the tools to be able to direct that conversation and direct that perception. So when we break it down, brand is reputation, or reputation is brand. Brand strategy, really basically, and I'll run through some things that we do with brand strategy. But the brand strategy is really just a plan that controls the position that you put your brand into the market. So it's where do you want to put your brand? Is it high value, rare sort of icon status? Is it like a supermarket brand? Is it more value for money? Are you doing something different that no one else is doing? That's the plan that actually starts to position you in the market, and the brand is where the reputation comes through in a really simple way. So the questions that we always run through in brand strategy is the 5 ones. So, who are you? We want to know what's the history of you. How did you get to where you are? What are your aspirations? What does your business model look like? And most importantly, so what does success look like to you? So if we're to work together in 3 to 5 years, what does success look like to you? And how are we going to go about getting that success? Second question, why are you here? What's your purpose? Why do you exist? There's plenty of other drinks brands on the planet. So why are you here? What makes you special? What's the purpose? What's the reason for the project? What's the reason for the project right now? Why are we working together right now? And what would happen if you didn't embark on running through this brand strategy project or this brand refresh? What would happen to your business if we didn't do that? The third one is how are you unique, and we'll sort of touch back on this again. But uniqueness is a singularity. So it's what are you doing that nobody else is doing? This is usually one of the most important questions to answer, and it's the hardest questions to answer as well. Why would someone choose your brand over another one? So it comes back to that idea of being substitutable in the market. What are you doing that nobody else is doing? Number 4, how can you make a difference? How can you make a positive difference in your industry? A positive impact on your customer, your staff, your suppliers, your partners. How are you making a difference environmentally and sustainably as well? So this is, again, it's a little bit about how you're unique, but also what are you doing to actually make a positive difference? And the last one is who cares. So, we talk about stakeholders as being anyone that can make or break you. So this could be internal partners, distribution, your customer, your end customer, the gatekeepers to get to those customers, staff, suppliers, etc. So, who is it that cares about your brand? Now, we talked about how are you unique, and one of the things that we sort of talk to our clients on is like, what do you want to be famous for? So there's a couple of things we run through here, and again, it's not a whole bunch of things to be famous for. It's usually one thing, one or two things, and to get you in that mindset is to think about, okay, if your brand was to shut down in 20 years' time, and the local paper wrote an article about your brand, what would they say? What would posterity say about your brand? Now, the things that you're famous for, or that need to be meaningful. So it's not things that we get a lot of. We're value for money. That's no one's famous for being value for money. If you're a winery, a lot of people say, well, it's our vineyard. Well, unless you've got a really famous vineyard, no one's going to remember that either. And it's not that we're a family-run business. There's too many of them. You're not going to be famous for that. So think really hard about what you want to be famous for, what you can be famous for. We talk in terms of a rock band, like a rock band or a music band is not famous because of the instruments they play. They're famous because of what they do with those instruments. So it's more than just inputs into the brand that's going to make you famous. It's a really important thing to think about. We also run through, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, but personification. So if your brand was a person or a celebrity, who would it be? Now, if we can narrow it down, again, this is taking a bit of creative license here, but what we're looking at doing is building tone around someone's brand. If we can understand the brand as a person, then it gets us closer to understanding how that person would talk, how that person would act, what sort of clothes that person would wear, who that person would associate with, and those sorts of behaviours that person would exhibit. So we can start to get personality traits, we can start to look at values, we can start to look at behaviors and a whole lot more once we go through that step of thinking about your brand as a person. Now, there are also a whole lot of other ways you can think about it. Your brand as a song, or your brand as a genre of music, or your brand as a country or a destination. Your brand as a car. What these are doing is building associations around it that you can then start building meaning into your brand, and what we call is starting to build brand tone. So I'll give you an example of this. We have been working with Lark Distillery for the last 3 or 4 years, and the first project in that was a brand refresh. So Lark, if you don't know, it's based in Tasmania. They were the first craft distilleries and first distillery to be making whiskey in Australia. Started just about 30 years ago. Whiskey is traditionally a very masculine, sort of old men smoking cigars, sitting in leather with Chesterfields. What they wanted to do was flip that on the head. So part of the thing was when we started, who is Lark? And if Lark was a person, who would it be? And we came down to, Rihanna, Beyonce, and Taylor Swift. And it was that idea that rather than being an old man, it was going to be a really strong female voice. And this line that was from Rihanna, I think, be a girl with a mind, a bitch with an attitude, a lady with class. This became the behind the scenes, if you like, tone of voice that we would build into that brand. This is the packaging that went through for it, really making it very, very strong. But what was really important about where we got that tone from was in tone of voice in on-pack copy, and also in print and advertising. But then also how we started to photograph and display this product and show it in the hands of consumers. So yes, we have Bill Larkin on the left signing bottles, but then we're in clubs, and we're in mixes, and we're in cocktails, and we're doing a whole lot of things with a whole range of different people, which came out of that idea that Lark wasn't a man, it was a strong, principled female voice. Another example was Remphrey, who we worked with. They're a wine company in McLaren Vale. They're really the pair that run this. If they weren't doing wine, they would be environmentalists. They'd be saving the planet somewhere else. They run their vineyards sustainably and completely biodynamically. They've got native replanting programs and biodiversity through their vineyards. They've got education programs and eco trails. They're sort of doing everything they can. And the positioning around them was that they're looking to save the world one bottle of wine at a time. Their whole mantra was that healthy soils gave you healthy vines, which gave you delicious wine. And so the thinking behind this was, or the narrative behind this was, everything that's really important to this brand, you can't see, it's all underground. And so then that drove how this brand comes through, and the identity here with Remphrey, and then how the packaging comes through. So it's a really simple idea, really simple persona, but then how that can come through and work through in the brand. Number 2 is fish where the fish are. And this comes down to things like, the first one, and this is the first question we always ask our clients, who are you making wine for? It could also be, who are you making whiskey for? Who are you making beer for? Who are you making cocktails for? Now, usually the first thing that comes back to us is, well, we're making the sort of drinks that we want to drink, which is fine. And particularly in something like wine, that's quite often the case with the smaller companies. But I'm looking at, for the amount of money that you're going to be investing, if it was mine, I would be trying to make the sort of drinks that my customers want to drink. And if we take the idea of drinks, a lot of drinks companies focus on those inputs when they're talking about their product. So in the case of wine, you've got vineyards, regions, grapes, winemaking, etc. They're all sort of inputs into that product. rather than looking at the outputs. And we sort of look at it and say, well, what sort of a business are you? Are you a production-based business where those inputs are really important? Or are you a marketing-based drinks business where it's the output, it's the benefit to the customer that is more important? And I would say that, for the majority of drinks businesses, they should be the latter. They should be, we are looking at the market and we're a market-led business rather than being an input-led business. Now, just to give you an example, if someone like Nike acted the way that most drinks companies operate in the way that they market, they would be talking about how many stitches in their soles or what sort of material their soles made from, or where's the sole made and where's the uppers made and all that. And they don't talk about that at all. They don't bang on about inputs at all. What they continuously talk about and consistently talk about is the benefit, both tangible and emotional benefit that their customer gets from using their products. And I think that a lot of drinks companies need to do that more rather than inputs. They need to talk about what's the benefit of my product to my customer. Which brings us to, who is your customer? It's really important to understand your customer. Again, a lot of our clients, when we say, who is your customer, it may as well come down to anyone with a wallet and a heartbeat who's of legal drinking age. It's just you've got to be so much more targeted than that these days. And it's not just who your end customer is, but who are the gatekeepers to getting your products through to your customers. So we want to know, how old are your customers? At what stage in their life journey are they? What do they earn? What are they interested in? What are they really passionate about? What sort of car do they drive? Where do they consume drinks? Who are they consuming drinks with? What other sort of drinks do they enjoy? Are they into food? Are they into theatre? Are they into film? Are they into culture? All of those sorts of things. Who do they hang out with? And also, what spaces do they hang out in? Are they in bars? Do they go to restaurants? Are they consuming at home with friends? And then try to find out, what is it that they want out of a company like yours? What do they want out of that product? And one of the easiest things that we say to a client, like particularly if you're an existing client, you have a database, you have a client list. You definitely have gatekeepers, whether it's distributors or it's trade. So, it's pretty easy. Why don't you just go to ask them and find out what it is that they really want and see if you can use that insight to develop your business. We also really want to know about what channels you're going through, so on-premise versus off-premise and direct, and then even within those, I know that in Australia we've got, on-premise we have, bars and hotels. You might be on the pour there, or we have clubs, or we have restaurants, and then you've got high-end restaurants, and you've got sort of everyday bistros. In your off-premise, we have the big supermarket retailers like Dan Murphy's and vintage sellers and things like that. You have things like Costco, but then you have your sort of small independent licensed liquor stores as well, where you can actually be talking to the manager rather than going to distributors. And then you've got direct, so cellar doors, e-commerce, all of those sorts of things. So we want to know, where are you playing? Where do you want to play? What does each of those channels, what sort of effect do those channels have on your portfolio? And what sort of effect does those channels have on the customer that you're talking to? Because it's all going to be different. If you are in different channels, what's the role of that channel play in your portfolio, and what role does that play in your business goals? So we often see that, again, I'll use a wine example, but if you're in the big retail chains, then those brands often shouldn't be put into an on-premise because it's not going to work. The restaurants and bars don't want a brand that is sometimes heavily discounted through a retail chain. But if we're trying to reach a new audience, potentially we can develop a brand for those on-premise channels, so we could get a new audience into the brand and work that way. But we've developed a very different brand for that channel. So again, think about channel, why are you in those channels? What channels do you need to be in? And then how does that affect your overall portfolio strategy and structure as well? So just quickly, these are some projects that we've worked on that are purely for the restaurant market and the on-premise. So we can do things like we don't need brand names, we don't need varieties on the front. These will hit the table or to really make an impact across a bar. We also think about in terms of there's plenty of times when you're sitting at a restaurant where your partner might have, or people that you've gone to the bathroom or whatever. It gives you something beautiful to look at, something to read, something to do rather than just look at your phone. Third one is what's in a name. Now, we look at this as probably being arguably the most important part of branding. The name is the first thing you're going to hear, and it's the last thing you'll remember. And we've got sort of 8 rules that we roughly follow when we're consulting with companies about naming. So the first one is don't be boring, and something like MailChimp is a great example of this. Just don't be boring with your name. Try not to be limited. So, we've got plenty of, clients over here doing whiskey. They're also going into gin. We've got plenty of wine companies that are going into beer. So can we develop a name that doesn't limit you to one particular sort of beverage or one area? Something that grabs attention is really important, like Virgin. Something that expresses your brand. So if there's a story behind your name, that if someone asks you why you call this, you can very quickly go into a story that explains the brand. Really important. Does it tell a story? This is an Australian, Celebrations is an Australian liquor store. Fantastic name. Beautifully sort of pulling together the idea of cellar and Celebrations is a great name, I think. Does it have rhythm and cadence? Really important. Does it sound good to hear someone say it? And really importantly, does it feel good to say it? Those are all really important considerations when we come to naming. Now, naming is really difficult. Resistance is normal to naming. I would say be brave, be as brave as you can with naming, because this is where sort of most wine companies fall. And it's they'll name it after themselves, or they'll talk about where they live in a certain, Somewhere Hill or Chook's Farm or whatever. Now, this is sort of like what the category norm is, and I'll sort of say, try to get out of that category norm. If you think about really famous brands, particularly ones we just went through, none of them are named after their founders. They've also named, and the name adds to the brand. So, a couple of examples. We didn't look after these guys, but this is a wine brand here. Ladies who shoot their lunch. It immediately starts to bring up connotations and stories in your head as soon as you hear that. And a very, very hard thing to forget as well. A couple of clients that we've worked with and developed names for, Ministry of Clouds. Definitely came from the two partners being almost flip sides of a coin. Julian being the one that's dreaming of going and doing all these big things, Bernice being the voice of reason, saying, no, we're not going to do that, we can't afford that, back in place. So Ministry of Clouds came from that. And then Orbis, a vineyard that had a circular, sustainable philosophy about it, Orbis meaning circular. So that name springs back into their reason for being. And the last thing I'm going to sort of touch on is just how to bring all that through to life. So in design, what we say is design makes that strategy that we did makes it visible. So it brings that strategy to life. And through that, you're going to have assets like logos, trademarks, typography, color palettes, visual language, tone of voice, brand narratives, all of those things are going to come through. And quite often what we're doing is, getting up our clients to really stand out in the market. But I do also want to talk about, when is it that you might want to stand out or blend in? Now, really simple thing that you can do, you can have a look at all your competitors in your space. We track them very quickly from a traditional to contemporary, from a typographic to illustrative. You can do however you want. Start mapping them out so you can see if you wanted to stand out in a crowd, you can start to see where the gaps are, where you can fall that you're going to put away from your competition. But sometimes we have customers that, they're wanting to put out an extremely expensive bottle of whiskey or an icon bottle of wine, or they want to do something special in the sparkling area. And in those cases, particularly if they're new to that, sometimes it might be like, what are the category? How does everyone look in there? And perhaps we need to sort of bring some of those cues in to give us credibility that we can sit in that quadrant. So again, most of the time standing out is what we're saying, but sometimes you look at a category and go, you know what, we need to sort of look like that to fit in, to be credible in that area. And then the last thing, consistency builds trust. And I mean, consistency builds trust in life, and to me in brands, it builds trust as well. So, how can you bring that design language and make it consistent across all the media and touch points that you're going to be sitting in? Wix is a client that we've been working with for many years now. This is the refresh that we work for them. I won't go into but we've got a very simple aesthetic there, but with this very strong W chevron pattern that runs through everything, which then starts to run through everything from bars to when they've got pop-ups, right through to packaging. We can really amp it up, we can really bring it back. And then when we get into e-commerce and digital, that consistency of brand and consistency of language and consistency of intent and tone all go through to form a brand that's consistent across all its touch points. So thank you. I hope you got something of value out of that, and I'll minimize my screen, and if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for that value-packed presentation there. If you have any questions on the audience, please put them in the comments and we'll be able to address them shortly. Now, we did have one question, Matt, that came in during the presentation here. Candace Vilburn from Florida. She says, any suggestions for starting a wine and liquor brand from scratch?
Any suggestions? Well, definitely, I think following through some of those, particularly that first set of 5 questions that we ask our clients. If it was me, I would look at the market that you're going into. What is it that you can do differently in that market? Is there a gap in the market that needs to be filled? All of those things I'd be asking myself. Once I found that, I would be going through and say, okay, how can I be meaningfully different in that market, and how can I build customers to go from there? I mean, I'm assuming that you've got a bit of experience in drinks to start with, so the basics of things like getting distribution, getting licenses, and all of that. I think that probably that first, how can you be meaningfully different in the market, would be where I'd start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Then we had some questions offline. Thank you, Jupiter, for giving us a shout out here. We had some questions offline here. The first one is, should an established brand create alternative labels to attract new audiences?
Yeah, it could, definitely. And that's something that we find that with our clients, that happens quite a bit. So it might be that the established brand has a particular sort of customer or a particular sort of demographic. We find this a lot with particularly older brands where their audience is getting older with them, but they're not attracting younger audience into that brand. So one of the tactics you might employ would be to develop a new alternative label that would go into a very different channel to attract those customers in the brand. Once they're in the brand, you can then introduce them to the other labels that you have within your portfolio.
That's very, very interesting. I think there's a lot of sentimental value, right, on a label or a logo that's been around for many years. And sometimes I've seen customers that they don't want to get away from that, or not even experiment a little bit, not just try something new, but it's worth a try, right? I think it's worth to give it a try and do it on a scale where you can test and see if it has good reception or not.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also to go on that point about having a legacy, a lot of brand's customers, that they've been there with them for many, many years. They trust them, and quite often it's more about what's in the bottle than what's on the outside that they're buying it for. So you can keep them in on the journey as well as introducing new people into the brand if you do it carefully.
Yep, I agree. Another one is thoughts on using family name as the company name.
Yeah, I think it's. I was thinking about this a lot. It's almost the default for a lot of, particularly wine, and I think it's one of those. I think it's one of those defaults that you can actually run against and actually produce something that feels quite different because you don't use your family name. Again, there's something that we've been talking about building a business that's all about your customers rather than about yourself. And I think sometimes naming a business about yourself sort of is putting yourself at the center of that brand rather than the customer at the center of that brand. And I'd also bring it back to that list, and that's not an exhaustive list, but if you think of some of the world's most famous brands, there's not many of them that are named after a founder. So they're normally named in a way that says something about what to expect from that brand or what that brand promises. Rather than just being about the founder or where that founder is from.
Yep, I agree. I fell into that trap when choosing my company name because I had a few names, but I did a bit of research and with the focus group, and none of them liked those names. They said I should keep the family name on mine. So,
yeah.
But let's see.
Ventura sounds like it could be making anything, so
right. Yeah, it's a broad name for sure. And I think our last question here online is how to think creatively about the benefits of product that the product offers, right? Because we're talking about drinks, right? And pretty much all drinks do the same, right? They have the same effects, physical, emotional, but how can brands just develop that creative thinking to get more of the benefits that they could be showcasing in their market?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, you're right. I mean, drinks are drinks are drinks are drinks. Step back and think about when do people consume the drinks you're making and how they do it. So a lot of people that are making drinks fall into the trap that they think that their customers are as focused and obsessed about their drinks as that they are. So I know with wine companies and I know with, whiskey makers and things like that. And then they fall into the trap of just talking about how incredible their drinks are. Now, most consumers, they consume these drinks with people at occasions when they're eating, when they're having fun, when they're getting together, and drinks are a part of that experience. They're not the whole purpose. They're not the sole reason why people are getting together. So, unless you're, right into whiskeys or wines, you're not getting together just solely to drink. There's other reasons to do that. So if you can think about when people are drinking and what and why they're drinking, then you can start to bring, okay, how can I build benefit around that? And I'll give you a really quick example. There's an American wine brand, and I'm going to forget its name, but it's in Tetra Paks. And their whole reason for being is like adventure drinking, they call it. So if you're going camping, if you're going hiking, and you don't want to be taking bottles into the park and you don't want to be taking heavy bottles out of the park, this wine comes in Tetra Pak, it can be open and closed, it crushes down to nothing, it's light. So the benefit of that is that if you're going camping, you don't want to take a couple of heavy glass bottles, you can take a Tetra Pak and you're in and out and take all your rubbish with you. So that is a really creative way of thinking of a benefit that goes beyond the liquid inside. It actually comes to the packaging, and then that whole company is driven around this idea of adventure drinking, which is really unique.
Yeah.
I think.
That's an amazing concept. It's sort of like wine meets a Yeti outdoors.
Exactly. Yeah,
bringing people to where they want to be, right? Where they want to be, where they feel the best version of themselves, right? And not necessarily your product does that, but if it's there along on the right, that's where we should be.
Exactly. And on Yeti, I mean, that's a good example of a company that makes eskies. I mean, you can buy an Esky at Kmart for $10, or you can buy a
Right.
Yeti for $200. You know, that comes down to marketing and brand.
Yeah, for sure. Very well. Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming all the way from Australia here to meet with us. And we appreciate all the amazing information on how to build a drinks brand that people love. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. You can email me at hello@vc.wine. I'm going to put it right here, and then I'll forward that to Matt as well. And I appreciate everyone just connecting. And Matt, thank you again. Have a good one.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.